And I think she does. She wants to. So yeah. So thank you. So if it's okay with you guys, what I might do is just take about 10, 15 minutes just to present the the some concepts. Um, I sort of won't, I intentionally won't go into great detail about systems, although I will mention a couple through the presentation. But just be on the understanding, please, that a system is a system. It could be all it serves as a purpose within a framework, and it could be really any system. So, but I will mention a couple that we do use, but they could be potentially swapped in or out with anything. Um, the other thing I wrote some notes down here. I'll mention is I sort of want to look at a learning and assessment framework really, and therefore I want to focus on the framework, and therefore you plug different systems in to do different things within the framework. But the main point is this is some work I've done at North Coast here. It's based on some of that work. The main thing is to talk about refocusing our attention from the systems, which we're currently doing, of course, because we have to, but focusing instead on the student. So sort of flipping the whole thing on its head and looking at the student and their learning and assessment, experience and what they need, basically. And from that, developing a framework that then we can figure out, and we do know already, and I won't go down those rabbit holes, but all the different systems that support the different parts of a student's learning and assessment. So looking at that, I just want to talk about these three things at a high level because I've got all the documentation down as deep as we need to go. But just for now, I want to talk about the unique student identifier. Um, I did set up at North Coast an instance. This is, as you're probably both aware, sorry, I'm trying to tell you to suck eggs, but there's a Commonwealth service that we then, in the context of EBS or SMS and other states in Australia, use other systems, but we consume that unique student identifier and then give it a funding context. For example, it might be smart and skilled, et cetera, within the different states. And then we have our own student management systems so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But the reason I'm mentioning the student identifier, it gives us a way to identify a student across all of our products, not just training packages, but commercial ventures with other states, for example, the thing talked about with Queensland at the moment, etc. So the the federal government allows institutes, and as I said, I'd set up a test server. They allow us, and I propose we do it as we're talking about Kyle with TGA. We have our own instance because what that enables us to do is to identify a student even before they're a student using, for example, like I said, I don't want to talk about systems a lot, but using a CRM system, our marketing CRM Oracle system, that allows us to set up a token for student even before they have a USI, or before we know they have a USI is a better way to say it, that we can start to track a user as they start to engage with our marketing. And at the point that they do enroll with us, then using that, we can then map that token from that CRM system to that USI. Uh, does TAFE have any non? Sorry, Trace. Sorry, Kyle. Just ask me, mate, if you like, or do you want to wait until I get through this? It's up to you, whichever way you want to go.
Yeah, I'll just type it out as it comes to mind and then
Okay, that's good. We might go back to it because I want to try and cover, about 6 slides as quickly as I can. So I better speed up a bit, actually. I won't go into all the detail of every matter, but the USI, I'm proposing that we use that as a primary identifier because it allows us to identify a student across all of our products. The next thing I want to talk about is the unique call service, which is the equivalent is like the UTAS is the main component of that. And of course, that's also when we had our own TGA instance that was cleaned up, and cleansed, and all those problems we find all the time. That's part of that whole thing, and I won't go into that. I've got diagrams of all this and specifications, all of it, but if I go down the rabbit hole, we'll sort of get stuck there. But the idea is that we have a unique way of identifying our products, all of our training assessment product. And the last thing is the thing that I call the cell. This is a combination that it's a customer experience, which is basically the CRM component, the Oracle component of the customer's experience. And I'll show a diagram, an interactive diagram in a minute that explains that a bit better. But also then the learning layer. So in other words, our LMSs and content management systems, all that stuff. So it's a digital container that puts together the CRM components with our learning components, and that whole thing is a digital container that manages all the information. I'll demonstrate what I mean shortly. I'm just going to go in there and just going to show you a demonstration of that. So I want to start first of all with the student, of course. Again, I've got a lot of information on all this. I've done a lot of work around basically the life cycle of the student. But as we know, a student are our potential student until they become our student, then they are our student, then they study with us, then they leave, then they come back, they go to uni, etc. The thing I want to say about all that, but is the USI is the way to identify that person no matter where they are in any educational system in Australia forever and ever and a day. That remains constant. So the combination, so again, that's the USI. So the customer experience, or the student experience as they go through us, is really from that unique student identifier, the way to identify no matter what product they're using from us, not only learning and assessment, but also other support services, etc., and commercial opportunities, etc. So that's why I'm mentioning that the USI again and the student view of data. The next thing I want to briefly look at, okay, so the UCS. What is a UCS? So what it is really this. The UCS is the product, and it'll be a combination of a whole range of things. Don't worry, some of these systems have changed, the names have changed, but they're the same things. But that's basically what we're talking about. We have a product that is defined by an ETAS basically, that all different tools, this is a gap analysis tool for example, there's a whole range of tools that provide, no matter what the delivery context, because we'll look at that a bit later when we look at the ETAS component, but provides the learning and assessments to the student. Now that's really a snapshot, and I've got again more technical details about all this, but that's just like a snapshot of what it's like. The next one I wrote is actually the cell. So the cell, how it works is like this. We have this unique student identifier object, and what it does, it allows the student then, using the two primary systems of a CRM and an SMS, those two primary systems, to contain all the information relevant to that student at that point in time related to all their learning assessment. It connects then all their communications, their progress in their courses, whether it's face-to-face, online, blended, etc., because they're just all variables of this data set. And that unique student identifier then, through those two primary tools, and I don't want to go down into all the details about it, but through those two primary tools then allows us to connect. For example, our student can connect then to their face-to-face, for example, call center stuff. Sorry, I'll just zoom in a bit more. I'll just go here. Sorry, there's a lot of information there. I've had to make a 3D representation because it's so interconnected and so much stuff. But I'll just go there for a second. Sorry, when I find it, where is it? Connecting learning centers. Yeah. So it connects the student through either through their face-to-face interactions, as we know the people put the Oracle stuff in. David come in and ask me about blah blah blah. So that's the face-to-face component of that Oracle CRM system. Plus, of course, all of our other stuff, our call center stuff. Their online, whatever, and also, of course, our connected learning centers. So using that unique student identifier component of the cell object, so that's the CE component, the customer experience component, we connect our student to our face-to-face, our connected learning centers, all those types of components. If we look then at the other side, the LMS side, of course, the unique student identifier then, of course, connects our students to all the learning assessment components. So I might just leave that there. I'm happy, and there's a video that I've had made around this too, which explains it in a lot more detail. But I might just leave it there if it's okay, and just move on to the next thing I wanted to talk about. I'll just get rid of that, and of course, happy to come back to this at any time or whatever. I'll just go back to okay. So that's sort of in a nutshell what the cell is. It's a way of connecting those face-to-face CRM type things with the LMS type things. Oops. So that's it in a nutshell. The each individual USI, unique student identifier, is an individual going through all these cycles. I've got documentation on what all these words mean basically, and what our clients are. There's a range of besides students, by the way. I'm just using the example of the student here. We have other clients that we can go into that as well, but I won't right now. So really, the cell is the digital container that we own and maintain, which combines that CRM LMS information in a digital container. And again, it's a point in time because that changes every day as the learner progresses through all the different things. It's a live thing. That digital container contains that live data information. Then we have the USC, which is our framework, and that's the combination of EBS and all that stuff, all those components. And the last thing is the USI learner instance, because the combination of the CRM token that we map to the USI, that we map to the EBS student or the SMS student, to that commercial private product, whatever, all those variables, that's contained within that instance, and we own that as well. So these are a lot of different systems doing different things, but that's the primary concept, that we maintain these frameworks, these technical frameworks that then connect all those systems. I'll just briefly talk about, so this is talking about basically a unique core service, and one of the components of that is the ETAS, which drives from a training TGA perspective what that is. And as we know, that's a combination of units of competency from TGA basically, that are given a whole range of different contexts around delivery, deployment, all these different variables. I've identified them. There's nearly 1,000 variables that I've mapped all out. But basically, what happens is, using our data services, and I've just put these here examples, and you guys know this stuff. But basically, that provides the information which makes up a unique core service, and I'm talking at the moment about the ETAS component of that. And what it basically is the combination of units of competency that make it up for that different particular instance of the UTAS. And it has two parts, as we know. This is the way the business currently works. It has a part A, which is designed by the skills points, and it has a part B, which is engaged by regional delivery, that contextualise or customise the part B component of that TAS. And I won't go into all the details of all those things, but there's a whole range of processes and systems and a range of things that happen within those contexts. And as we know, then we output the part B contextualisation, or in the case of a new business case, for actually a new instance of the product, in fact, the content in the learning bank, and that's delivered through our different delivery modes. I'll just very briefly show you a mock-up that I've made of what an ETAS, electronic TAS would look like. It looks like this. I'll just do a quick search. So I'm going to talk about, we're looking at a UTAS. So this is the highest level parent object of what a TAS is. It's a unique TAS instance related to all that stuff I talked about with CRM and all that other stuff, all those variables. But basically the skills points create a parent UTAS, and I'm just going to search for one. If they don't find it, for example, we would then create an Opmo shell. We just create a shell because it doesn't exist yet. So in other words, it's a product that's not actually an Opmo or whatever, but it's something we're planning to do. But I'll talk to this scenario that I'm going to search for something, and yep, I found a UTAS. There it is. So I've just done a quick search. This is only mock-up.
Dave, this might be a really silly question, but why do we start with an Opmo?
We can do either. The idea is the possibility would be for either an Opmo exists or not, an EBS instance exists or not, and like I said, there's a lot of technical stuff behind this, and
wouldn't we start with the TAS, not the Opmo?
Which came first, the chicken or egg, Trace, in that way, because both possibilities are possible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm with Dave on that one. It's sort of like you decide that you want to sell a product, and when you've decided you want to sell that product, then you're going to design the strategy for it.
Because you don't know yet until you've actually done. There's a whole range of things. Because I haven't talked about before this, Trace, around the CRM component, about the industry engagement and all that. That precedes that, and may in fact drive a unique core service. It does as an initiation, but it's not done yet. If that's making sense, we haven't done all the work yet to actually figure out because it will change. That's the whole point of having electronic.
Well, I suppose that's kind of my point, is the Opmo is currently at least based on the McTAS.
Yep.
So if we're going to build here a UTAS or an ETAS, there's too many TASs for me, Dave, but anyway.
Me too.
Build a TAS.
Wait till you see the breakdown.
I don't understand why we would be selecting an Opmo, but maybe I'm drilling into too much detail.
I think
that logic doesn't work for me.
Sure, I'm happy to have the discussion, but for me, it's which came first, the chicken and the egg, which I can explain when we have more time to talk about it. Because of the CR component, I'm really keeping it out of this conversation as much as I can. But in the context of the, sorry, I'll stop talking about. Sorry. Happy to follow that up. So the scenario I'm talking to is that. It doesn't matter. I'll just talk to the scenario that I'm from the business. I'm a regional delivery. So I've looked for this UTAS and I've found, that's the one I want. And it's owned by this person. There's all the information. I can click on the TGA information, whatever. Oh, yeah, that's what I want. And I confirm, yep, that's the parent. That's the parent I want. Now, the parent has, and I've broken this down, really high-level information. It's high level, but I've identified what that is. I've worked with Joni and other people to figure out what it is. But it's got high level information. So I'm going to look at it, and this is the high level information. It's really the Part A stuff, and it has all this stuff and has all the license fee stuff. This all comes from TGA into this web service, and it's got, okay, there's your core units. Does it equal what? Yes, it equals what. Here's your electives. Now the idea is that the business can now modify this, and we have algorithms that check the rules, because we're able to bring in the TGA rules, and on the fly a user can change them as long as the algorithm says, computer says yes, everything's hunky-dory to use this. And as you know, we would have more electives, for example, that the skills point is defined. These are the range of electives, and if there's 20, you can use 15 or whatever. There'll be rules around all that. But basically, the user looks at it. This is the Part A the skills point is completed in the context of this UTAS. So now this is a child. We've gone from a parent to a child now, and I'm looking at this, say, yep, okay, that's good, and I'm happy with it. So I say, okay, I want to use this one. What that does now is brings me into Part B, which is my regional delivery information. Now this is a whole another set of data sets which I've got, and we can make much of electronic geolocation, a whole range of stuff so I won't go down that rabbit hole. But we have a lot of systems that we can, electronic systems we can integrate. But like I said, I'll resist going down that hole. But basically, the region configures the delivery information to the context and changes whatever they change and blah, blah, blah. We have two rules. Customization, we know that value is 10% and da-da-da. And then if they click something else and the computer says no, computer says sorry, that's no longer contextualization, that's a customization, say business case, etc., like I showed in that other diagram. So really, really briefly, that's just like a mock-up of what it could look like, and the idea is that I end up then with my list of these are the grandchildren now. These are the actual, and these have subsets again, sorry, and I won't go into it in much detail, but international, cohort, TVET, da-da-da-da, so there's a range of instances. Now that's all interconnected, so that if anybody anywhere within that system needs to change anything outside of the rules that are set around the values that they're allowed to change it, of course, obviously we go back up the chain, grandchild to child to parent, etc., back up the chain. So I'll just keep on going because I just want to, if I can, I'm looking at the time, get a little bit further, and then because this is only one part of it, but a really important part, of course, and happy to come back all this stuff later. Sorry, I'll just want to set down, close current. Okay, so moving right along. Really, what I've been talking about really briefly, is that this unique course service has a primary design element called a UTAS, which defines these variables, and then there's a whole range of, and I hate the names, all the TAS names too, Trace. I think the parent-child-grandchild relationship is a better way to think about it, because otherwise people think about one object, not how it's interrelated. But they're interrelated, and I have, of course, all the design specifications. It gives you a headache, Kyle, but you'll like it. It's got all the data sets of all the breakdowns of all the different variables. So that's what it is, basically. And I'm proposing that moving forward in the shorter term, Trace, until we get our big super system, that LAMS will continue to do that stuff. And we would build basically the ETAS. I'm talking about the framework of the ETAS, not all the different components about making all the stuff and doing all the analysis, all that stuff. I've got all those details too, but that's getting down a bit too deep. But LAMS will continue to do that as it does, but move away from Word documents, basically. Because what I'm proposing we do, at a lower level, down at the this is an example of an assessment event. At the assessment event level, as we know, we've defined already, there's these modes, there's these methods, etc. So we've already done the work on the meta schema of what an assessment event is, and also, of course, a learning event. So as I mentioned right at the start, I see that we should be focusing on learning events and assessment events, and they're related to units of competency. So I'm proposing that we would use then the course creator, and I'll explain why as quickly as I can. We would use that tool to do that, and we would use LAMS to do this. So just really briefly, and sorry, I'll give you a chance to, I'm talking as fast as I can, we'll give you a chance to ask questions at the end of it all, and happy to go down any rabbit hole. But basically, LAMS would continue, and sorry, LAMS is data, sorry. LAMS is going to change its name to, data is going to change its name to LAMS soon, because data is so confusing. Everybody says data, what data, So in the next probably month, it will change its name to LAMS. It actually exists. We're moving in the TPC and all that stuff. But basically, LAMS does the digital design of all these things that it already does, and the approval workflows until we, we start to integrate ServiceNow, for example, for tickets, and the PDMS for, content event, all those different, plug-in things. But basically, it does the, if you like, the high-level digital design, framework design of those components. And what I'm proposing also is that we seriously look at updating Course Creator with the new templates, for example, and I'll explain why. LAMS can do the framework stuff, which identifies units, comps, and all that, but the Course Creator really drills down. I'll just show you an example. Drills down at a digital level. Tracy knows this. Sorry, Kyle, but you may not have heard this yet. I just need to log in. Sorry, just take me a moment. What the Course Creator does is electronically identify. I'll just get to an example. It auto-generates. It doesn't use Word document. It outputs Word documents. It outputs HTML5 to go to Moodle. It outputs PDF documents, etc. So the data outputs documents, not documents creating things. So in other words, it allows us to see all these. This performance evidence 1.1 is green. It electronically allows us to, from the TGA, information around the lower levels of a unit of competency, the performance elements, the performance criteria, the foundation skills, etc., allows us to electronically map those items within the unit of competency to and data enter. I'll just show you an example. So this is what it sort of ends up looking like. Those elements that are all there end up in all these range of documents. And what data does, where I enter the text about that performance evidence, for example, it puts that text across all the documents that need it, all the student-facing documents, all the assessor-facing documents. So it gives us one place to edit text. So it abstracts text data entry from mapping of a unit of competency to the subsets of that unit of competency, the performance elements, etc., if that makes sense. So, and then it allows us to then do compliance and all that stuff on these blocks of text and pre-visualize using the software where that fits within that range of documents, so that somebody doing compliance or whatever can look at the words and then see the electronic mapping of those words through all the documents. So in other words, have to look through a whole bunch of documents as our people currently do. They can look at the text and see the relationship that has been mapped to within that unit of competency. That's why I'm suggesting we use this tool to do that. So I'll keep on going because sorry, I'm aware we don't have a lot of time. So this is an example now, and I'll stop talking in a minute. This is an example now of taking this to an example of a virtual environment or an augmented environment. So in other words, I'm talking about in this context an assessment event in a UCS, which is 1, 2, 3. Of course, SMS is all plugged in that. The user comes in through the virtual experience, and we can authenticate them. There's many technologies to do that in AI. For example, there's optical, there's eye recognition and thumbs and all sorts of things. But we basically authenticate the student. The system then figures out, because the student is navigating, it pulls from a physics library this object, and there's been a defined assessment event 2 for unit of competency 1, and there's the variables. We know that it's online, we know that it's a project, and we know that the delivery location is virtual. So that gives us then, from a data perspective, the definition of what this particular assessment event is. It's UCS 1, 2, 3, unit of competency 1, assessment event 2. Now that, if we think of that both in the context of learning and assessment, that's the way we identify all the events, learning and assessment events, related to a USI, a user, related to the UCS. So that's like a really brief demonstration of how it will work in that context. Okay, sorry about going so fast, but I'll probably stop the recording. No, I'll leave the recording go because and answer all the questions you've got. No doubt you've got heaps. And sorry, should I read the stuff? Kyle, do you want to talk to the main questions?
Just notes so that I don't forget because I'm easily distracted. So going back, the very first one is around non-nationally recognised training. So because, as you said, all of this is sort of is linked upon the USI. The USI is only required for nationally recognised training, and it's only required. Well, technically, it's only required to receive a certificate for your nationally recognised training. So there's nothing to stop people enrolling without a USI. You can have a policy, for example, that says they must have it. That's cool. But then, like you also said, if you're making, I don't know if TAFE does this, but I know it is a thing. For example, if you're doing custom training for corporations that isn't nationally recognised, then how are you going to capture these people?
Yep.
I mean, you can still tell them they must have a USI, even if it's never going to go onto their
Well,
USI
there's
record.
another thing. Sorry, I didn't go down as you know, just because of time in any detail about anything very much. Sorry, but in the context, I'm proposing that yes, the UNI is our nationally you know, for those products that use those funding sources, other funding sources. But what I'm proposing, we have a digital twin of that, which is the CRM token identifier. So our when a student comes into our system before they actually enrol in a course, we can use that CRM token. And my proposal is, and I've got technical information on this, that we at the point that they do have USI, we map that token to that, and we know from then on when they even come back when they're not doing a course with us, but they're just looking around and interested in another course. This is the marketing stuff that I've done a fair bit of work on as well. It enables us not to flame people, but if they're just coming back and sort of looking around, maybe we can see that they've done an electrical trade course. That token will let us know that they're probably interested in doing an advanced diploma or something. So there's a whole conversation around that, but just really shortly, USI is the primary identifier unless it doesn't exist. In that case, we would use the CRM token until such point as we could map that CRM token to that USI, if that made sense.
Yeah, that's. I was just concerned that there might be a group of people that don't get captured, so that's
It's
cool.
true.
And
It's
like I
true.
said, TAFE can mandate that anyone that they deliver training to makes a USI.
Yes.
Whether or not that's desirable is a different question, but it can
Yeah.
become a policy thing as part of your enrolment. You
Yeah.
provide a USO and you don't get processed until you do a USI. Sorry,
Yeah.
so that's cool. Just making sure that's there. The second one. So basically, you were saying what you are saying is that the cell is the layer that sits above or connects the LMS and the SMS.
Yes. Yes.
And sorry, the SMS and it wasn't the LMS, it was
Oh, so
the
the CRM, yeah, sorry, that sort of connects the
yes,
CRM,
yeah, yeah.
so the Oracle, you know, like face-to-face
Yep,
telephone calls, all that stuff, the data entry points.
yep. But
Um,
and then presumably the SMS seems to be the right one. I think the SMS in turn will be receiving potentially information from other systems, such
yes,
as the LMS, and so that's where any grades that are put into Moodle or any attendance rates and progression for international students.
exactly.
So
That
that's
gives us, yes, that's our feedback for the student. You're exactly 100% right. Yes.
cool. I get that.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
The one problem with that is SMS, unfortunately, so our conversations had discovered that they didn't sort of didn't get the TGA unit of competency importance of all this in relation to the SMS. For example, when a student comes into the learning or the assessment, but we'll talk about the assessment, they come into the assessment event. Of course, that's identified, as we know, from a unit of competency from TGI and a particular part of that unit of competency, whatever it is. You know, and it's an assessment event one or whatever. They were just sort of figuring that we're just going to do all this stuff on the fly, but that's not how it works because, as we know, the TAS has identified what that unit is, has also identified all the assessment events related to that unit, related to that industry, etc. And that's where we can get into detail. I know you enjoy it when we get down to the ETAS, all those variables.
Why
Because
would they want to do it on the fly if it all exists already?
well, it's because of the way, in my view, that it had been used before. It's an academic product that's been used in universities, and professors do jump into the class and put together. They have a library of assessment events, and they throw it all together and send it out to students. Say, there you go.
Yeah,
And they just didn't have an understanding, unfortunately for us, of how we do business, which is we don't do that. We have it all planned, you know, in the one TAFE model. From the skills points, actually do the parent. They do the parent design of what learning is, and then the regions do the children and the grandchildren because of all those different contexts that we need for actual delivery. So although the parent, you know, UTAS design is designed at that high level with those variables which I've identified, what happens in reality when it comes to be delivered, it needs to be customized to a whole range of things. For example, out in the regions, for example, we don't have that equipment, we don't have that teacher with our skills, etc., etc. All these other, you know, things, and they're all identifiable variables that the regional delivery teams need to customise that unique experience for that cohort in that region with that gear, etc. All those variables.
yeah, okay, that's cool. The next one is not an important thing, just a thing that popped up. I think, generally speaking, customer experience is abbreviated to CX.
It is.
It's just me being a dick. I noticed it says CE, so I just thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the question, which you did end up answering, and I guess this probably then turns into potentially a similar concern to what Tracy had, whether the UTAS is comparable to the MACTAS or whether it's higher again.
I think we need to have a longer discussion on that. To be honest, I've done some work on using our current information around the different TASs and done some work on it. But I think it's something we need to have. Yeah, we need to speak in more detail. Totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah, because I do agree. I feel like there are so many TASs, and I'm not really sure what the point. It's one of those things where you just end up with so much stuff, so much instruction that it becomes no instruction.
Exactly. If you use, I'll just quickly show you this really briefly. I've actually broken it down. So there's actually a more. This is from our current business of how we develop TASs, not looking at a TAS type, but looking at what are the components, and I've identified and mapped across all TAS types. The U component. So there's a U component that's across all TAS types, and down further in this document, then I break down all the individual TASs. So the U components are across all TASs and their variables. The next part is the part A. So you have the stuff that's across all TASs. Then you have a unique part A that the skill points develops, because the skills point is a group of industries, as you know. We've got the taxonomy on that. So it's industry 1, 2, 3. So then they have their variables that are related to that context of that industry, of that skills point, in other words. So then they put their part A variables in. Now this is again common for that skills point, common to all TAS types for that skills point. Then the next level down, so it looks like that. So these are sort of the selectors, and that's how I mocked up that mock-up. That I select one of these things, I select one of these things, and that leads on to that until I get to submit. And then what happens? I end up at that, which is these are again high level. So this is now the child, and these are the grandchildren, because then we have different contexts again that have extra variables, which are the CTAS, the MIT-TAS, the BAT-TAS. So they have all different variables again, if that all made sense. I'm happy to share this information with you, mate.
Like the TAS, I guess the hierarchy, it should end up kind of like a pyramid, in the sense that at the very top, for example, is UTAS. It has the least amount of information.
Exactly.
And as it goes down, the pertinent information specific to that cohort, the mode, or the region fills out, right?
Exactly. So just looking at that example, we see this is at a UTAS level, so at the least amount of information, as you said. I've only got two choices at this point. Is it regional delivery or is it skills point? So this allows us, this ends up being either a cohort or a MACTAS, basically. But these are variables these are driven from how the business works. So I've got a choice. Which one is it? So I'll just choose skills point for the sake of the argument. Then I need to put in my information that informs the unique instance. So these variables give me my unique instance, and then I create it. So I've created my UTAS, and now it exists. But I need to add these other variables here. So we can auto-fill some data. We can get the resource ID, delivery dates, all that stuff from EBS, blah, blah, blah. But there's some stuff, volume of learning, whatever, that we need to manually enter into the system. We can use tools, of course, but at the moment, this is manual entry. That now has made that parent. And the next level down is now I've got the parent. I need to now do the next step, which is all these variables. And you'll see the ones with blue. It means I can select more than one variable. So I choose my variables again. At the end of that process of choosing all those variables, I've ended up with my child now.
Are these made by different people as well? In the sense that someone, way up the food chain makes the UTAS, and then someone at
yes. So this is,
you know what I mean? Like
I do. So this is another part of the business that I haven't put into here. This is precedes this. This is the CRM component that our people who market things. Sorry, I'll just stop the recording. Our people who, because